You know Shakespeare's The Tempest, right? It's that classic tale of magic, revenge, and what seems like a pretty happy ending. But what if the story didn't actually end when the curtain fell? What if, after death, all the characters had to stand before a tribunal and answer for every single thing they did? But this time, with no magic to hide behind. Well, that's what we're digging into today. A moral reckoning for the Tempest, where the truth is the only thing that matters.
This is the question that just changes everything. It reframes the entire play. We're not looking at the spectacle of the storm anymore. We're looking at the moral mess it left behind. See, this isn't about what happened. It's about what was owed.
So, first things first, the tribunal goes right for the throat. It sets out to completely dismantle the idea of power itself. It starts by asking about the very foundation of everyone's authority, from the king all the way down to the castaway. And this is the opening shot, fired by the old counselor, Gonzalo. It's such a simple question, but man, it immediately exposes the cracks in everybody's story. It cuts through all the noise about who was a duke or who was a king. The real question is, did any of you have a moral right to be in charge of anything?
And it really boils down to three competing claims. On one hand, you have Prospero, who says, hey, I was the rightful duke. I ruled by title, by legitimacy. Then you've got his brother, Antonio, who's basically like, power belongs to whoever's strong enough to take it. End of story. And then there's Caliban, whose claim is the most fundamental of all. This island was mine first. I was born here.
Wow. I mean, this one line from Antonio just says it all, doesn't it? He's not even sorry. For him, legitimacy is just a fancy word that losers use to make themselves feel better. The only thing that matters is who wins. He took over Milan because he could, and as far as he's concerned, that's the only justification he needs. But Caliban comes back with this just a killer rebuttal. Prospero tries to argue that he took over the island because he needed to survive, and Caliban's response cuts right to the heart of it. Think about that. Just because you need to survive somewhere, does that give you the right to own it, to rule it? It's such a powerful challenge to that whole way of thinking. And here's the kicker. The tribunal doesn't pick a side. It doesn't say, oh, Prospero was right, or Caliban was right. Instead, it concludes that nobody's hands are clean. Every single claim to power, whether it was through law or brute force or birthright, was in the end forced on other people. Rule was never a right. It was just an act of enforcement. Okay, so if ruling is just enforcing your will, that brings us to the play's big climax, Prospero forgiving everyone. We're taught to see this as this beautiful, virtuous moment. But the tribunal asks a much tougher question. Was this really mercy, or was it just Prospero's final power move?
See, the tribunal breaks it down like this. There are two totally different kinds of forgiveness. There's forgiveness from above. That's what a powerful person does to end a fight, usually to make themselves feel better. But then there's forgiveness from below, which is what happens when someone who did wrong actually asks for it, because they want to make things right. One can be a form of control, the other requires genuine remorse.
And Caliban's perspective here is just absolutely crucial. He points out that when the person who has crushed you suddenly forgives you, it doesn't feel like a gift. It feels like another order. Like you're being told how you should feel, that you should be grateful. It's not grace, it's an instruction. So, this all leads to the ultimate test. The tribunal puts Antonio on the spot, the guy who started this whole mess. He's been forgiven by Prospero, sure, but has he actually changed? Does he feel even a little bit sorry? This is the moment of truth. And his answer is just chilling. A single word. No. No remorse, no regret. He doesn't want forgiveness because he doesn't think he did anything wrong. And that one little word proves that Prospero's grand act of mercy, it meant absolutely nothing to the one person who needed it most. And so the tribunal lands on this really sobering idea. Forgiveness isn't always this pure, beautiful thing. When it's used as a tool by the person in charge, especially when they don't ask for any real change from the other side, well, it starts to look a lot less like mercy and a lot more like another form of control. All right, so if rule was all about enforcement and forgiveness was about control, what does that make this storm itself? You know, the central event of the whole play. Was it justice? Was it revenge? Or was it something else entirely? And here comes Caliban again with another one of those questions that just flips your whole perspective. If you think about the storm not as an act of God, but as a carefully staged production, well, every piece of theater needs an audience. So who was Prospero performing for? Because think about it. The storm didn't teach everyone the same lesson.
For King Alonso, who already felt guilty, it was this horrible, painful wake-up call. But for a ruthless guy like Sebastian, it was just an opportunity to plot another murder. And for the clowns, Trinculo and Stephano, it was just a crazy adventure. Same storm, wildly different takeaways.
So the conclusion becomes pretty clear. It wasn't justice because it didn't punish the right people. It wasn't purely revenge either. It was theater, a performance staged by Prospero to make his enemies feel completely helpless and, let's be honest, to watch them squirm. It was a show for them, and for an audience of one, himself. Which brings us to the final accounting. After all the magic, all the fear, all the forgiveness, who actually changed? And maybe more importantly, who got to walk away without changing at all?
When you look at the final score, it's pretty revealing. You've got Alonso, who changed, but only because he was shattered by grief. You have Caliban, who learned to regret his actions, but never got back what was taken from him. Then there's Prospero, who gave up his magic, sure, but only after he'd already won the game. And then there's Antonio. 0 consequences, 0 lessons learned. And Antonio's final statement in the tribunal is maybe the most haunting thing of all. He doesn't blame himself. He blames the system that let him get away with it. He says, "I escaped because no one made me do more." Prospero's mercy, the king's forgiveness, none of it actually demanded that he be held accountable. So, that happy ending of the Tempest, it starts to feel not so happy. The tribunal doesn't wrap everything up with a nice little bow. It leaves us with this unanswered remainder. It's the uncomfortable truth that justice wasn't served equally and the scales were never really balanced.
And that forces us to ask a final question, and it's not just about the play anymore, it's about us, in our world. When we offer easy forgiveness without demanding any real accountability, when we rush to a tidy ending for a very messy story, who is left to pay the price for that? The play is over, but that question definitely isn't.